A young queen kneels in the cold dawn, gazing at the sword that will claim her life. She gave her king her heart, and now, even in death, he may not let her keep it. What kind of fate rips the heart from a queen's body? This is the harrowing story of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, a queen whose rise to glory and brutal fall changed the course of English history. Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church and cast aside his first wife just to marry Anne. She was bold, educated, and in love, and for a few short years, Anne wore the crown and held the king's heart. But when she failed to produce a male heir, Henry accused her of treason and adultery, even with her own brother. In May 1536, after only 3 years as queen, Anne Boleyn paid with her life. Her shocking execution and the eerie mystery of her missing heart secured her place as one of history's most tragic and intriguing figures. How did Anne ascend so high, and what twists of betrayal led to her devastating end? Anne's journey to the throne was as unlikely as it was meteoric. Born around 1501 to Sir Thomas Boleyn and Lady Elizabeth Howard, a family of ambitious courtiers with royal connections, Anne was groomed for greatness. As a girl, she was sent to Europe, serving in the glamorous courts of Burgundy and France, where she learned music, literature, fashion, and poise. When Anne returned to England, she stood out. Fluent in French, witty and confident, catching every eye at court. By 1526, one pair of eyes in particular were fixed on her, those of King Henry VIII. Henry's long marriage to Catherine of Aragon had produced no surviving sons, leaving him desperate for an heir. Anne refused to become the king's mistress, as her own sister had once been. She dared to hold out for marriage, whether from virtue or ambition. For Henry, Anne was an intoxicating challenge. He declared his heart belonged to her alone, famously writing love letters filled with longing and sealing them with a heart around her initials. Consumed by passion and the need for a male heir, Henry moved heaven and earth for Anne. He defied the Pope and split England from the Roman Catholic Church so he could annul his first marriage and wed her. A momentous decision that ignited the English Reformation. At last, in January 1533, after 7 years of courtship and waiting, Henry and Anne married in secret, before his divorce was even finalized. Anne was crowned Queen of England in a breathtaking ceremony that summer, greeted by cheering crowds and lavish festivities. Confident and brilliant, Anne seemed destined to transform the realm. In September 1533, she gave birth to a healthy child, but to Henry's bitter disappointment, it was a daughter, Elizabeth. The king's joy turned to thinly veiled frustration. Anne had given him a child, but not the son she'd promised. Still, Henry assured her a boy would follow. As Anne settled into queenship, wearing magnificent gowns and wielding influence at court, she did not yet realize how precarious her position truly was. She had won the crown through passionate defiance, but the very forces that elevated Anne were already gathering to destroy her. The cracks in Anne's triumph began to spread almost immediately. Her frank, strong-willed nature and reformist religious ideas earned her powerful enemies among the king's advisors and in Europe. Many in England still loved the cast-aside Queen Catherine and viewed Anne as a usurper. Whispers at court called her witch, temptress, the concubine. Each day that passed without a prince for Henry sharpened the knives of those awaiting her downfall. By late 1535, Henry's eye had begun to wander. Anne had miscarried a second pregnancy, and the aging king, now fearful he'd never have a son, turned his attentions to one of her own ladies-in-waiting, the demure Jane Seymour. Anne was aware of Jane's presence, but could not imagine the danger. Meanwhile, an old ally was turning against her, Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister. Cromwell had helped engineer Henry's break with Rome and Anne's marriage, but now he saw the winds shifting. Historian reports suggest that Cromwell quietly set out to orchestrate Anne's ruin, He planted spies among her ladies and gathered gossip of any indiscretion, twisting innocent courtly flirtations into lethal evidence. All was done in utmost secrecy. Anne had no idea that an invisible net was tightening around her. In January 1536, tragedy struck. Anne miscarried yet again, this time a male fetus of about 3.5 months. The long-awaited son was lost, and Henry was furious and heartbroken. The court swirled with ominous rumors. Some blamed the miscarriage on the shock Anne suffered when Henry was badly injured in a jousting accident days before. Others whispered it was divine punishment, or that the king was already planning to replace Anne. Indeed, Henry's affections were now openly turning to Jane Seymour, whom he showered with gifts, even as Anne wept for her lost child. For Anne Boleyn, the writing was on the wall, though she struggled to read it. Her power was crumbling, and former friends maneuvered to save themselves. Even her own uncle, Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, one of the most powerful men in England, grew distant, sensing the royal favor shifting. The coup de grace came with breathtaking speed. On May 1st, 1536, the king and queen attended a lavish May Day jousting tournament. Anne watched proudly as her brother and the young court gentleman competed. Suddenly, in the midst of the revelry, Henry stood and stormed out of the arena without warning. He had received news, likely from Cromwell, that the investigation had borne fruit. That same night, 2 of Anne's close friends, Henry Norris and Mark Smeaton, were arrested on charges of adultery with the Queen. The next morning, Anne herself was confronted and arrested. Shaken and bewildered, she was escorted through Traitor's Gate into the Tower of London, the fortress that had once hosted her triumphal coronation festivities only 3 years before. Now those stone walls became her prison. Within a fortnight, the pregnant queen found herself accused of an almost unthinkable litany of crimes: adultery with 5 men, including her own brother George Boleyn, and conspiring to murder the king. On May 15th, 1536, Anne Boleyn was hauled into a makeshift courtroom in the Tower's Great Hall to face her judgment. As a queen, she was granted the privilege of being tried by a jury of peers, but it was a cruel farce. The jury was packed with her enemies, and presiding as Lord High Steward was Anne's own uncle, Duke of Norfolk. Imagine the scene. You are Anne, standing proud and dignified in a plain black gown, staring up at the judges. Among them is your father, forced to sit in judgment of his beloved daughter. The charges are read out: treason, adultery, incest, each accusation more shocking than the last. In the hushed hall of 2,000 spectators, Anne proclaimed her innocence with fiery grace, refuting each charge with wise and discreet answers. Witnesses later marveled that she defended herself so clearly, as though she had never been faulty. But it was not enough. The outcome had been decided before she ever set foot in that room. In a unanimous verdict, the jury found her guilty. Tears streaked down Norfolk's face as he pronounced the sentence on his niece. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, was sentenced to death, to be burned here within the Tower of London on the green, or else to have thy head smitten off, as the king's pleasure shall be. Burned alive or beheaded, the choice lay with Henry. The mighty Tudor queen, who once dared to defy Europe for love, was now stripped of her titles and at the mercy of her scorned husband. Anne's fate was sealed, but the manner of her execution would prove the final twist of the knife. Dawn broke on May 19th, 1536, cold and bright. Anne Boleyn had been granted a mercy of sorts. Henry VIII, perhaps in a last gesture of token kindness, or simply to avoid a messy spectacle, chose beheading by a skilled French swordsman rather than the typical axe or a burning stake. The French executioner was famed for delivering a swift, clean blow. Anne knew this, and even managed a grim jest the night before. "I heard say the executioner was very good," she quipped with a thin smile. "And I have a little neck." In the darkness of her cell, she wrapped her hands around her slender neck and laughed. a final show of courage to those watching. Now, as the hour of death arrived, Anne stepped out into the Tower Green, where a scaffold draped in black awaited her. She had dressed with meticulous care and dignity, in a gown of dark gray damask, trimmed with ermine fur, a crimson kirtle peeking beneath, the color of martyr's blood. On her head she wore an English gable hood, which she removed at the scaffold, tucking her long dark hair under a linen cap to bare her neck. A crowd of perhaps 1,000 courtiers and guards crowded around the platform, including Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, Henry Fitzroy, the Duke of Richmond, the king's illegitimate son, and of course, Thomas Cromwell, the architect of her doom. They all stared at the fallen queen. One witness murmured that never had she looked so beautiful. Sir William Kingston, the constable of the Tower, helped Anne up the scaffold steps. She stood before the crowd with an untroubled countenance, determined to meet death on her own terms. When Kingston gave her leave to speak, Anne addressed the people one last time. In a clear, steady voice, she spoke words of startling grace. "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, for according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, gentle sovereign lord." Her words praised the very man who had condemned her, calling Henry merciful, a statement dripping with irony. Yet Anne did not waver. Perhaps she hoped to safeguard her infant daughter Elizabeth by showing no bitterness. Perhaps in that final moment, she made her peace. With her brief farewell complete, Anne knelt upright on the straw-covered platform. There was no chopping block, as the swordsman's technique was to strike while she knelt freely. She prayed softly, repeating, "O Lord, have mercy on me. To Jesus Christ I commend my soul." Her ladies in waiting, weeping, stepped forward to tie a blindfold over her eyes. For a terrifying moment, Anne knelt in darkness, lips moving in prayer, not knowing when the blow would come. The executioner, imported secretly from Calais, was so expert that Anne never saw the sword that killed her. To distract the doomed queen, he called out for his assistant to hand him the sword. And in that split second, as Anne instinctively turned her head, swoosh! The blade flashed through the morning air and took her head off in one clean stroke. Anne Boleyn's life was over in an instant. A stunned silence fell. Then accounts say a lone figure, perhaps the executioner, lifted the queen's severed head by the hair and cried, "God save the king." Somewhere in the distance, a cannon fired, signaling London that the deed was done. Anne's ladies gathered up her head and body, wrapping them in white cloth. No royal funeral would honor this dishonored queen. Instead, an old elm arrow chest, an empty box used for storing arrows, was scrounged as a makeshift coffin for Anne's remains. That afternoon, she was hastily buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the Tower grounds, near the bodies of the very men accused alongside her. There was no ceremony, no memorial, just a nameless grave beneath the cold stone floor. Henry VIII, in his haste to move on, married Jane Seymour not even 2 weeks later, a mere 11 days after Anne's execution. Anne Boleyn's life had ended, but in many ways, her story was far from over. As the Tower gates closed and the court tried to forget, an unsettling question hung in the air. What became of the Queen's heart? Legends soon swirled around the grisly fate of Anne Boleyn's heart, the very symbol of the love and betrayal at the center of her life. According to one eerie tale, Henry VIII could not let go of his passion, even in death. This rumor claimed the king had ordered Anne's heart to be removed from her corpse and kept as a morbid keepsake, a token of the love he'd once borne for the woman he destroyed. Another story insisted it was Anne herself, in her last moments, who begged for her heart to be taken to a place she held dear. That place was a quiet little church in the countryside, St. Mary's Church in Irwerton, Suffolk. near her family's lands, where Anne had spent some of the happiest days of her youth. It sounds like the stuff of Gothic fiction. A heart excised and secretly buried, apart from its body, and indeed we cannot be certain any of it really happened. By the 1500s, the old medieval custom of heart burial was dying out, quite literally, and was rarely practiced. Yet the whispers persisted. For generations, villagers around Irwerton, also called Arwerton, passed down a chilling tale. Anne Boleyn's heart lies within their parish church. In the 1800s, this legend gained astonishing credibility. During renovations of St. Mary's Church in 1837, workmen uncovered a curious artifact hidden in the church wall, a small heart-shaped casket made of lead. Inside were the decayed remains of what appeared to be a human heart reduced to dust. There was no inscription, no name, but the local lore immediately filled in the blanks. The church's records noted that Anne's grieving uncle, Sir Philip Parker, lived at Irwerton Hall nearby, and after her execution in the Tower of London, 19 May 1536, it was recorded that her heart was buried in this church by her uncle, Sir Philip Parker of Irwerton Hall. Could it be true? Did Sir Philip really retrieve his niece's heart from London and hide it away in the walls of a Suffolk church? We have no definitive proof, only the tantalizing discovery of that heart-shaped reliquary and the stories handed down over centuries. The parishioners of Irwerton certainly believe it. They reburied the little casket respectfully under the church organ and placed a plaque to mark the spot where Queen Anne's heart is said to rest. Back in London, Anne's body still lies in the cold chapel floor of the tower, missing its head, and perhaps missing its heart. The tale of the hidden heart has only added to Anne Boleyn's mystique, casting a supernatural shadow over an already tragic fate. Even in death, her story refused to rest quietly. Nearly 490 years have passed since Anne Boleyn walked to her death, yet her life echoes loudly in England's story. Her brief, tumultuous time as queen forever altered the course of history. By capturing Henry VIII's heart, Anne triggered the upheaval of the English Reformation. The king tore England from the Catholic Church, a religious transformation that would shape the nation's identity for centuries. Anne's downfall also served as a brutal lesson in the dangerous politics of the Tudor court, where ambition could lift you to unimaginable heights or send you to the scaffold in a heartbeat. For Henry, Anne's name was to be wiped out. During his reign, he literally had her memory chiseled out of palace walls and her badges torn down. But Anne would not remain erased. In 1558, her daughter with Henry, Elizabeth, ascended the throne as Queen Elizabeth I. The child that Henry once dismissed for being a girl became one of the greatest monarchs in British history. Elizabeth's long and glorious reign vindicated Anne's life in a way Anne never got to see. The daughter of the executed traitor queen ushered in a golden age, proving that Anne had given England not a prince, but something just as powerful, a legacy. Historians agree that Anne's life and shocking death significantly influenced the religious and political landscape of Tudor England. And through Elizabeth I, Anne's bloodline changed the fate of the kingdom. Today, Anne Boleyn captivates us as much as ever. Was she a ruthless seductress who willingly went too far, or a wronged innocent destroyed by a tyrant's paranoia? The debate rages on. Countless books, films, and TV series have tried to interpret her enigmatic character. She has been painted as everything from a scheming six-fingered witch to a martyr of love and reform. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. But one thing is certain. Anne's story resonates as a timeless tale of power and passion, betrayal and tragedy. She was a woman who reached for greatness in a man's world and paid the ultimate price. Her life is a stark reminder of how swiftly fortune can turn, even for a queen, and how history's most dramatic narratives are often written in blood. Anne Boleyn's heart, whether it truly rests beneath an old church organ or not, has become a poignant symbol of her enduring legacy In a sense, her heart belongs to all who tell and retell her story, keeping her memory alive. Her fate continues to haunt us, fascinate us, and warn us about the deadly interplay of love and power. Now it's your turn to ensure Anne's tale lives on. If this story gripped you, don't let it end here. Remember Anne Boleyn, share her story, and learn from the echoes of the past. Thank you for watching. If you found Anne's story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe for more cinematic history. Together, let's uncover the secrets and lessons of the past, one extraordinary story at a time.